As a PE founder, I've talked a lot about my experiences, my takeaways, and my learnings from being in the industry. Also, I've talked about some of my successes along the way. But what you don't see as much is an in-depth look at some of the failures. We were working on a large deal for us for a very long time. And you know what? The deal died. This was a deal within a large franchise system where we were going to become a very large franchisee. Now, I can't share the brand name. Feel free to leave your guess in the comments. But regardless, I think you'll find the story interesting and hopefully be able to learn from it. This was a deal that was in a space that we had looked at before. However, the stars didn't quite align on a lot of those previous deals. Maybe the deal was too small or we didn't like the brand. However, serendipitously got introduced to a really high quality CEO that has been in the industry for many years, had a team underneath him that we could plug in, and boom, shortly after, we did find the right deal. However, what was consistent on this one is that it was always changing. We were trying to buy specific units within one franchise, and because of what was going on within that franchise, the deal that we were actually working on always changed. You know, maybe it was this geographic region or that geographic region, and really it went on for quite a long time. Ultimately, where we got was looking at one of the larger franchisees in the system. This franchisee was particularly attractive because it was really more a true company as opposed to just a collection of different units within this franchise. You know, additionally, the geographic concentration of this package was really attractive. So it wasn't a situation where we felt like we were going to be spread out all across the US. It was really concentrated in a few different states in one particular region, which was really attractive. So set up meetings with the sellers and, talked about what we were wanting to do, and got to hear about the history of the company from the sellers, and just continued with negotiations, and luckily enough, ultimately, we were able to agree to terms. Great, right? For these deals, we'll do what's called a QOE, quality of earnings. And typically what goes on in those quality of earnings is first they'll get the financials consistent with GAAP. Then what they'll do as a secondary step or part of the process is to create what's called a pro forma adjusted EBITDA to really get a feel for what you can expect cash flow to be going forward. And at this particular stage in the deal, we had some very significant add backs. There were changes going on not only in the US economy that impacted our deal, but there were just things going on within this specific company as well as the brand as a whole. Now, when talking with lenders or other folks that were potentially going to invest in the deal, there was a little bit of skepticism about whether or not those add backs were justified. And our position throughout was, this TTM period does have a lot of add backs. However, once we look at the next 2, maybe 3 months, you'll see that on an unadjusted basis, these add backs are justified. So that was kind of the thought process, if you will. Well, what happened is we get those 2 months of operating performance, and those 2 months, actually they were October and November, they were very bad. The company actually lost money. Well, the deal didn't die at that point. Instead, we got together and really just were trying to be as open, forthcoming in order to try and meet in the middle and figure out a way forward. What we decided is that, let's just kind of pause, not entirely, but, let's just see what happens the next few months and see if performance stabilizes and if we think it makes sense to come back to the table. Well, good news was that performance did in fact improve. From our perspective, finally got to the point where we thought that yes, our original offer is probably going to work. However, here's where the choices of the seller started to impact the deal. One is that he was reluctant to spend money on legal work. Now, we're talking about a deal that was approaching $100 million, and it was really hard for us to understand why the seller wouldn't be willing to spend, we're not talking about $20, $30, $40, $50,000 worth of legal fees. We're talking about certainly less than $5,000, because a lot of what we were doing at this stage was relatively preliminary document review and whatnot. But on the other, what was going on is that the seller wanted to do things sequentially as opposed to simultaneously. So, I mean, when we're working on a deal, I mean, we kind of treat it as not a sprint, but also not a marathon. It's something more along the lines of maybe like a 1,600 meter race. And in order to complete that race as quickly as you can, you don't have the luxury of completing task A, then B, then C, then D. You got to do all those tasks at the same time as fast as you can. That just wasn't the choice of the seller to do it that way. So what happened is we got, continued months and months of performance, and December, January, February, all great months. Actually, we had great months through March, April, May, June, July, September. The deal still looked really good, but last year we had 2 bad months in October and November. Even if we have just decent months, we should be in a better position at the end of this November because of how bad the previous October and November were. Not the case. October and November were not only bad, but they were much worse than they were the previous year. So now all of a sudden we have EBITDA that is going down not just a little bit, but precipitously. So really, we had no option but to retrade the deal. We had to go back to the sellers and say, listen, we can't offer you what we originally offered. We've got to reevaluate, and we perfectly understand if that means you have to back out of the deal. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. The seller thought that the assets were the same, that nothing had really changed to the actual assets that we were buying. But I think that that's one of the key distinctions that perhaps the seller and his advisor didn't realize, is that at the end of the day, yes, we are buying assets, but we're only buying those assets because they're throwing off a certain level of cash flow. And if that cash flow drops meaningfully, then those assets are worth less. From our perspective, that's kind of how we run our deals. So as challenging and as disappointing and as costly as that deal was, there are a few takeaways. The first one I would say is that it is hard to close deals, even if you have a lot of experience, even if you have a lot of things going for you, et cetera, et cetera. There are still a lot of things that are going to be outside of your control that you're just going to have to deal with, unfortunately. The second key takeaway I would say is that, you might have heard the expression that time kills all deals. And it's certainly something that I believe in. You look at this deal, I mean, we were working on for over a year. We'd just be talking like, Nick, this deal is dragging on. You know what happens when deals drag on? And say, yes, exactly. That's why we always try and think of deals as trying to get them done as fast as you can, because you never know what the future is going to hold, or if you're going to have 2, 3, 4 months of bad performance. The last key takeaway is, who is successful in this world? I think it's so easy to compare yourself to other people, especially, for me it is anyway. I'll look and see people out there, in the M&A space, they're just so much more successful than I am. I think, do they work harder? Are they smarter? What are they doing differently than me? And what can I do in order to replicate or emulate what they're doing so that I can be more successful? But at the end of the day, I have gotten better at not comparing myself to others and really just comparing myself to myself. And what that means is putting in the effort when I think I need to, challenging myself, trying to be objective, and when I'm thinking about deals and whatnot, because in this world, life in general isn't fair. Business isn't fair. Private equity, M&A, none of those things are fair. And so for that reason, I will continue to try and look at what other people do in order to improve what I'm doing. But I really just focus on myself, focus on the deals that I'm working on, and do everything that I can within my power to make sure those deals close. So what do you think? Now, after hearing the story, were there a lot of mistakes that you think I made, or is this a situation where it just didn't work out? Let me know. I certainly do have thick skin, and if you want to be critical, let me have it, or if you just want to hear more about the deal, feel free to email me or send me a comment. Thanks for watching.